Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, live from No Sale Studios on the Ace of Tavern, Acefield Retro. And as always, I am joined by the one bad Chad to break down all the news. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot, dude. Another Monday evening, another week of Wrestling Tonight, another week of some good stuff to talk about. Not as jam-packed as Mania week last week, but I feel like there's still some interesting stuff on the table to talk about.
Yeah, it feels like the hangover after a large party that week, WrestleMania week, was chaos. So if you guys missed any of our coverage, we have you from wall to wall, whether it be GCW Impact, WrestleMania, of course, and then the AEW content as well. There's a lot to break down. And honestly, it was a great WrestleMania week. One of the better ones I remember. The WrestleMania stuff was good, but everything surrounding it was epic as well.
Yeah, it was a really, really fun weekend. And honestly, like being a week removed from Mania, I think you got to, and we may have talked about this, but I think you got to put that Mania week up against any of the Mania weeks. I mean, it's a top 3, top 5 Mania for me.
Yeah, and there's a level of fatigue from wrestling, and it's interesting because usually following WrestleMania, there's this lull point, but I don't know, maybe we're too in the weeds and maybe people can tell us about it, but it really feels like things are peaking up, and maybe that has to do with AEW's bigger shows not being tied to WrestleMania, but I feel like we are on our way to Double or Nothing, which feels like a WrestleMania adjacent show now with Double or Nothing.
Yeah, I love that they don't piggyback off of Mania week, and because once Mania is done, at the beginning of April, all sites go to Vegas, Double or Nothing for me. And I think we're entering into AEW's kind of prime time where it's Double or Nothing, kind of bookending the summer, starting it with Double or Nothing, ending it with All Out. And now we'll get into it in our big stories of the week. Now we're throwing in an extra All In. So it's going to be a fun summer.
All right. With that being said, let's get to the big 3 stories and talk about what we have for the week.
Let's do it.
Big stories. Story 1.
As Elton John had said, the bitch is back. Vince McMahon seems like he's in the big chair again, mustache and all. And this is a conversation that's going to spark a lot of controversy among different wrestling fans. And there's no denying, Chad, that the tea leaves have proven that there's Vince's touch on things. I mean, Meltzer confirmed a PW Insider report on Monday saying that Vince was very much in charge of Raw. At this point, Meltzer actually said he's back. It is what it is. It will be what it was before. And if people think that was bad, it will be bad. And that's just the way it is. We saw some script changes. People are obviously they're micro analyzing everything that happens on the show. But at the same time, what do you think about this? Is there something to be said about are we looking too much into it? Or is it just okay, Vince is definitely back?
I mean, we're not looking too much into it. It's obvious to me. And I know there's a lot of people, even friends of ours on their shows, railing against the dirt sheets and these reports. And, but it's we're on wrestling podcasts, man. We're fans. We like talking about this stuff. I'm not damning it good or bad that he's back. I have my opinions and we'll get into that. Yeah. But when I see something, you can't just blanket statement say this is just dumb dirt sheets spreading lies, because when I look at this report, you're seeing PW Insider report on it. You're seeing Fightful report on it. You're seeing The Observer report on it. You're seeing PW Torch report on it. These aren't Cheeto eating fat boys in their basement, just complaining. These are guys who have covered the sport with reputation behind it. Whatever you want to feel about the Meltzers and the Wade Kellers of the world, yeah, they get things wrong sometimes, but they get a lot of things right too. And people forget these guys are leaning on their sources. So sometimes reports don't shake out the way they're told. I think there's a big difference between the Torches, the PWIs, the Observers, the Fightfuls. There's a big difference between those places and your spots like Ringside News or Zero New, whatever that one spot. There's a lot of trash sites out
circle type of thing. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of trash sites, but when I see the big boys all reporting on this, you gotta think there's validity to it, and you can't just roll your eyes at it.
Yeah, it's if it's a smoke and fire situation where there is a lot of truth to something because everybody's talking about it, and we've seen actual evidence that he is back. Like we'll talk about the script changes and things that have happened on the fly that is not just like conjecture. That is things that was not happening when Paul Levesque was completely in charge. And now that we have inklings that Vince is back in the big chair, and he has an office, by the way, guys. He wasn't at SmackDown, but he was very much at Raw sitting in the chair. And at WrestleMania, he was involved as well. And whether you think that's a good or bad thing, you just said it before, and that's up for opinion on everybody else. I mean, I think everything that went down, the fact that he bought his way out of these issues is just commentary on a larger issue among society that you can just throw money at an issue if you're a shitty person. But we've seen the new TKO company with Dana White and Vince McMahon. They're both Teflon. Nothing can drop them. But I just think ignoring, to piggyback when you said, I think what you said is so beautiful about the dirt sheets is because a lot of the people that rag on these dirt sheets are ones that don't read the actual source. What they will is read that watered down source on Twitter that someone posted a meme with Dave Meltzer's quote taking out of context. And I think if you sit there and read the newsletter, which is like 59 pages this week, it's fact driven. It truly is. There's nothing in there.
It really is.
Only thing that's opinion is the star ratings, which people get mad about. And we could talk about that as well. I mean, he had Meltzer went on like this rant saying like, if we're within a half star of each other, we're in agreement. So people were saying, how didn't you give Rhea and Charlotte 5 stars? It's one man's rating. You're putting too much stock into it. It's his opinion. So
it's one guy's opinion. Yeah.
It's your fault that if you don't think Shingo Takagi and Aaron Henare was the match of the weekend, he does. That's his opinion. You're just putting stock into his opinion.
And it kills me too, because like you said it right, how people will see the tweet that is pulling a clip or throwing it on a meme, and they will take that as what Wade Keller, Sean Ross Sapp, Meltzer, all of those guys, where if you really, especially like I'm more tapped into the Observer thanks to you, piggybacking off of your Observer account. I listen to a lot of their shows while I work my day job, and you can't critique Meltzer based off the opinion of Bruce Pritchard and those and the Eric Bischoffs of the world shitting on Meltzer. Like if you really take in his content, the guy isn't just sitting there spewing off like his own made up lies. Like it is, like you said, very fact driven, very based in history. Like he's giving you, like we've always said, his eulogies on any of the wrestlers that passed were second to none. The guy is a historian. He's not so much a break news kind of guy. You know, for me, like I think a lot of people.
No, he's not. Yeah,
guy in the weeds, like having moles and breaking all this news. I don't see Meltzer as that. I feel like he's, and he gets kind of the stereotype of, well, it might happen and it might not happen, you know. But that's him being like, he rarely digs his heels in the sand, at least from what I've listened to over the past year or so. He rarely digs his heels and says this is the way it is. He because he knows he's basing it off of other things. So it just kills me when people shit on these dirt sheets just from afar, just from the opinions they've heard on Something to Wrestle, instead of like actually taking in the content and seeing if the guy's legit or not. And the last thing I'll say about this is we talk about the validity of, is McMahon back at Raw? Is he back in control? And all the reports that came out, and people want to relate it to the Saudi sell. How, well, look what they did with Saudi. All the, when that was a false report, there was no truth behind it. And then all these reports flood out of Saudi purchasing WWE. If you go back to that, the big sites, the Meltzers, the Fightfuls, they were not like locking in on this. It was bodyslam.net and the guy, Steve Molberger or whatever his name was. They jumped the gun on it, and all the reputable sites were like, hey, this is what they're saying. Our sources haven't confirmed anything. So it's not like everyone was jumping on it and reporting it. So it's I just don't understand the overall critique of, you can't use this blanket statement of quote unquote dirt sheets to describe everyone giving us wrestling news. Like, what do you guys want? Do you want no news? Do you want just the companies to feed us their corporate speak? Like, do you not want to know what's happening? Like, are you someone that just wants to tune into Raw, watch the product, and you know nothing else? I guess that's one way to be a fan, but I like getting the news. I like getting the behind the scenes action.
Yeah, and the same people that are saying that the dirt sheets are wrong about Vince being back are the same people using those dirt sheets to prove that he's not back. Like they're like, according to Fightful, he wasn't on SmackDown. But if you're believing that because it's supporting what you believe, you have to take some validity on the other side. And as far as keeping score about who's right and wrong, his things that he got wrong are going to be much louder than things he got right. Again, this is coming from experience for someone who's gone through every newsletter in 1996, every newsletter in 1995, and I'm halfway through 1998 right now because we're doing that for Shot Nostalgia. I read every single word of those newsletters, looking at the numbers and predicting what goes on. It's fascinating. And I would say, I mean, there's things that come to fruition that he had predicted. And if you don't believe it, subscribe yourself and check it out. But anyway, let's get into a little bit about the details here about Vince being in the big chair. One of the big calling cards of Vince being back is clearly script changes, ripping up the Raw matches as it happens. We have a clip of something that raised a lot of eyebrows here.
Yeah, this is Seth Rollins. Apologies to the audio listeners, but if you're watching on video, you'll see this is Seth Rollins at Raw. He's in the ring awaiting, his segment to start in the commercial break, and looks like he's in an argument with some guys. So check this out.
See?
The calling card of the Vince era is just not knowing what Raw looks like, not getting matches announced, not having. That was the refreshing part of having Paul Levesque in charge. You would announce a match for Raw, you'd have 4 announced, and they would happen.
Yep.
There was a lot of that not happening on Raw this week.
Yeah, and who knows, like, Seth, this is out of context. I think fans are looking for things, like you said, going over everything with a fine-tooth comb, but to me, it's 2 producers standing there talking to Seth, and he's obviously being very animated and passionate in his rebuttal to whatever they're telling him. It looked like there was a little bit of an argument going on just by body language.
Yep.
And we know in that segment, he literally came out and just conducted the crowd as they sang his song, and then he left. So it's like, just being a fan and knowing that doesn't seem like a segment to me. It seems like his shit got cut.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously everyone had their eyes towards Friday with SmackDown, and everyone said that Triple H was reportedly the go-to person as far as creative stuff goes. Vince was not present at SmackDown in Portland, Oregon, but he did review creative plans remotely. There were some minor changes made to the script, but nothing major. So we don't know. I mean, other reports have said this represents a drastic backstage environment change during Monday's post-WrestleMania 39 Raw in Los Angeles. That was a difference, and maybe he'll have more of a hand in Raw than SmackDown, the 2 production teams, or maybe he's letting Triple H do his thing. Again, he's back in the capacity, but maybe he's trying to shift his role because he has faith in what Paul Levesque was doing, but we're just basing it on history at this point. We know that this guy likes to have his hand in things. He likes to change his mind at the last minute, and that frustrates everybody and it lowers the morale, because part of what we heard about with WWE is morale was at an all-time high with Triple H at the helm. There was a lot of happy people with not just the way they're being booked, but there was a consistent manner of how they're being communicated to. And that's just wasn't the case with Vince in the latter years. And I don't think it's going to get better with him being only a year older and gone through all the shit that he did. There's like this power struggle and whatever. I think this is not a conversation about WWE being in trouble financially or whatever. No. They are in absolutely great shape. This is more of a conversation of just understanding that it's not a good thing that he's back, especially the optic of what happened not even that long ago. We're sitting here talking about the allegations that, I mean, you can make your own opinion on it. He purchased and threw money at the problem. He didn't go through the litigation of proving himself innocent. He just didn't do that. So to me, that's almost an admission of guilt, especially when there's multiple people coming out and saying the things he did. So he's a disgusting human being. And the fact that we're just looking past it, talking about creative, to me, just speaks to the world at large and wrestling at large, that it's more about like, oh, he's ripping up scripts more than he's just an awful human being.
100%. 100%. It blows my mind that a year ago, these Wall Street Journal reports are coming out and all these people are like standing up and speaking out against the guy. And now it's like that never existed. People are, it just reminds me of Michael Jackson. Like he got to such a level of stardom that all of the reports that came out about him, all of the victims that came out and spoke out about him, people still rock and beat it, man. They're still rocking Thriller.
Right.
It's the same thing with Vince. Like, it kills me that people just really, it's like they want to ignore the situation. And, you talked about the high morale with Triple H. I feel like there was hope, everyone was like, well, at least I have a fair shake.
Yeah.
Now I'm not fighting against a hopeless booker who just doesn't see anything in me. And Fightful reported that there's low morale backstage. And there was also reports of high ranking main event talent saying, hey, if after the WWE Raw, they were after Mania, they're like, if this is how it's going to be, I want out.
Yeah.
There were multiple sources reporting on that. So I don't think, just from an age perspective, I don't think it's a long-term thing to worry about, because I mean, how long can the guy really sit in the chair? I guess he could sit into his 90s if he so chose to do so. But at the same time, I'm like, you are a part of this big conglomerate now that wants money. If he would start doing moves like 2018, 2019, 2020, like when the fans were really low on the product, from a creative standpoint, I think there would be some sort of motion to move him out, but what do I know? The guy's been untouchable thus far. Maybe he, and it was kind of alluded to that there are things in his contract that protect him. Like, if he gets booted, he owns all of his IP. He gets a major payout. So he's kind of sitting there like, get rid of me. I don't care.
Yeah. What a great find for him. This deal is absolutely Vince McMahon positive heavy for himself.
Yeah.
But I'm going back to some of the comments made on Turnbuckle Tavern's Instagram page. And I think you had posted a meme with him, and everyone's been posting memes. I posted the Addams Family thing with his mustache, and it's just funny. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, what he's done. It's funny. You look ridiculous. But one of the things people kept saying was like, you should thank him. This weekend wouldn't be possible without him. And yeah, you're right. But that doesn't just excuse everything that went on. I can still think he's an awful human being and not want to support the product that he's bringing out there because of who he is. You mentioned Michael Jackson. That's a great correlation I didn't even think about. But people look past transgressions because of their fandom, and Vince McMahon's just the latest example of it.
And I don't understand, like, the loyalty to this guy. I really don't. And that's not me. Like, do I appreciate that this man gave us how we see wrestling today? Obviously, man, the spectacle of it all, like, I respect what he did. He's given more to this business than any one individual. I agree with that. I love the wrestling I grew up with, but I'm not going to look the other way. And there's a part of me, it's like, dude, if he wouldn't have done it, I'm not saying it would have been done the same way, but wrestling wouldn't
you're saying
win
the
away.
quiet part out loud that you'd say it. I know what you're going to say. It's
like,
what needs to be said.
If he wouldn't have done it, Bischoff would have done it. Jim Crockett would have done it. Someone would have filled that void. I'm not saying wrestling today would be the way it is today. It would be different. It's the butterfly effect. but he was just the guy with the vision at the time to make the move. And honestly, this is going to rile some people up.
Do
The
it.
wrestling that I like, I think would have been better if Jim Crockett and those type of guys had more control than a Vince. Vince took wrestling in a direction that I'm not a big fan of. And not to say he like, I love sports entertainment. I love the spectacle. I love the weird, crazy shit like Undertaker, Papa Shango, all the weird kind of out there things that he brought into wrestling. I'm a fan of that stuff, but give me NWA, man. Give me that type of stuff over. What would have happened if you had those type of territory minds seeing the writing on the wall of national television for pro wrestling? What would wrestling have turned into? Would we get a more New Japan style wrestling for adults, or would it be this kind of circus show that we get with WWE? It's just a thought. I respect McMahon, but with everything that he did, with all these allegations from the last year, honestly, fuck the guy. That's my
Agreed.
view on him. I think he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, and I think that there's a world where you could pay homage to what he's accomplished in the wrestling business, but also hold him accountable as far as the legacy goes. And he's trying to rewrite what his legacy is. And I think people, they're always going to look past things. I mean, this is just every aspect of fandom. It's athletes, it's musicians, actors. People have a fandom and they have what they view as this guy. In their mind, this is who the guy is. And he's more than just what WWE was on the screen. And people need to realize that clearly. But point being, this is a story in progress, and unfortunately it's going to be something that we have to watch unfold in front of us and throughout the summer. And people are going to be looking and saying, see, it's not so bad. See, it's awful. There's going to be opinions. You can go to Cage Match and look at Monday's Raw, and it was the lowest rated Raw since forever ago. And that, again, it's just people's opinion, but WWE is too big to fail at this point. They are the absolute mothership that is hovering over the wrestling world, and they will never go under. But that's not the world that they were creating. Like, the content was good and they were just as big. But if they're moving towards a pay-per-view model, and that's a conversation for another time with this Endeavor stuff, they're going to have to work their ass off to create a product. And I don't know if Vince is equipped to give us that product. Triple H was. WrestleMania would have been worth the money they probably asked for it. But is Backlash worth it? Is King of the Ring, King and Queen of the Ring, is Crown Jewel worth it? So
yeah,
they're moving towards a different aspect. If they want to benefit monetarily from this pay-per-view model that UFC uses, which I watched the UFC pay-per-view last night, which was very good.
Yeah.
They have to really be pleasing the fans with storytelling. And Vince has shown his latest run of things, not great. Maybe he's proving us wrong. Maybe he'll lean on Triple H and let us do it, but I have my doubts.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, for the next however many years, months, whatever, every Raw, every SmackDown, there will be people saying, see, Triple H is in charge. See, Vince is back. Like, we're going to get that a lot. And like you said, WWE is the trendsetter, is the industry leader. They're not going anywhere. They're here to stay. But I'll just say, when I want a cheeseburger, McDonald's isn't going anywhere either, but I would much rather have Five Guys or In-N-Out than fucking McDonald's.
With that being said, let's go to In-N-Out. I know story number 2 could have been story number 1. I think we would have got a lot of comments that it shouldn't have been story number 1, but it's story number 2, but it's just as important as story number 1, in my opinion.
Let's go.
Big story 2.
On August 27th, AEW All In is coming to London Wembley Stadium. We're going to celebrate 100 years of Wembley Stadium, 100 years of Warner Brothers, and together with the AEW fans in London, AEW All In, we celebrate Wembley Stadium.
AEW's London, England debut was finally revealed on Wednesday's Dynamite, as AEW will head overseas for the first time for AEW All In. This will be their first event outside North America. Everybody circled the Craven Cottage where Fulham plays with 21,000 plus. That would still be their record of attendance. Has everyone talking about potential of this show, the pageantry of Wembley Stadium. We've seen SummerSlam 1992. We've seen recently a boxing match that 90,000 people there. concerts. I think the Live Aid show with Freddie Mercury is at Wembley Stadium. And I know it's a different building. It's been renovated. I'm almost positive they knocked down the original. It's on the same space kind of thing. But the lore of Wembley Stadium has appeal in wrestling. It's created this, and WWE's UK debut was Wembley Stadium. So it's a very apropos that 1992 from 1985, the timeline almost matches up with what AEW is trying to do a little bit before what WWE was. The question everyone's asking here, and maybe we'll talk about it here, is AEW ready for a stadium of this size? We've seen WWE do 80,000+ both nights of WrestleMania. What's the number in your mind that would make this a success, both optically and financially, to make it worth it?
Optically, unless they sell this out, they're going to be haters saying they didn't sell it out, So, but to me, like, if you hit, man, 50K, if you hit 50K, that's a home run, man.
Which is still 30 more than their biggest show, which was Grand Slam. That's a huge jump, and I love it, man. He's shooting barrels at this point. This is not playing it safe with their. This is literally all in. You want to go with the
love it.
word. I love it.
It what kills me too, like, we had a debate. It comes out when you're listening to this. It came out this morning, video up on YouTube. But this week's debate, we had Austin from Pro Wrestling Central and the question that he brought to the table was, is AEW ready for yearly stadium shows? And then this announcement came out. Like, we recorded it prior to the announcement.
Right.
We had no idea this was coming. And my take was, I'm ready when they're ready. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they should push for it unless they're ready. But like you said, Tony Khan's going for the throat here. This is a ballsy move. But with Tony being such an analytical numbers guy, I feel like he's got to know something. He's tied into London pretty heavily with Fulham, and I think they own, I want to say, hotels out there. Like, they're very entrenched in England, their company. So I think I've heard, I've never looked at the tape, but you hear when you see all the news and the reports. I've always heard that AEW is on a better TV channel, which actually gives them higher ratings than Raw, than WWE. Like, they're pulling really, really big numbers for Dynamite in the UK. And if you remember, people don't think about this, is when TNA was pulling, 1 million to 2 million viewers in the States for TV ratings, they were huge in UK. TNA, when they would go do tours in UK, they were pulling way better crowds there than they were in America. Like, the UK fan base is a rabid fan base, but man, I'm very, very happy that they're making this move, because it'll be fun to see them try and throw their hat in the ring of a stadium show. I think having two major American promotions with the ability to pull off a stadium show is only good for fans. So if you're a fan out there who's wanting AEW to fail at a stadium show, you're the fucking problem with the wrestling industry fan base. Like, every fan, regardless if you like AEW or not, you should want this to be a just glowing success for the company.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all ships types of things. Like, just as the Endeavor deal is good for AEW as well, and people don't realize that wrestling thriving is good for everybody involved in all the wrestlers, production, people behind the scenes, jobs in wrestling, and you as a fan. It's good for wrestling for them to succeed. As for this number, we've got setting the number and setting the bar. Like you said, I think people that don't like AEW are going to make fun of them for, if they do 40,000 in the capacity of 80, they'll be like, oh, they only did 50K in this building, or 50%, I should say. There is a huge chance for me. Like, I'm looking at, again, you mentioned the analytical mind of Tony Khan. I don't think this risk is not calculated. I think he has an idea about who's coming to play and who will come there. We've heard the reports about Airbnbs and and hotels in the area being called and almost booked immediately. And the other thing you have to consider is the travel from other places in Europe, being able to get from place to place. It's easier than traveling overseas. You're able to potentially get in a car and travel there, or a quicker flight. And those UK fans are rabid. You mentioned it. They are starving for the product. We watched Clash at the Castle become almost a bigger spectacle than WrestleMania in a lot of ways. And that card was, it was a good card. I admit. I mean, Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns really drove it.
But the crowd made that.
The crowd made the show.
Yeah.
And I think the UK have been waiting for this moment. And I mentioned Craven Cottage, and that was probably the low bar. We met, if you go back to when they made their LA debut, they being AEW, everyone was kind of saying, well, they probably should have went for, a bigger arena. They went for, or even the soccer arena where the LA Galaxy play. That would have been shooting for the moon. This is shooting for well past the moon. You're shooting over the moon. And I have to think, especially with bigger picture in mind, this is an optic that as Tony Khan, as a wrestling fan and a wrestling mind, and someone who has the better interest for wrestling in his perspective, watching the significance of WrestleMania weekend, drawing over 160,000 people in LA and seeing that, is this an overstep? Potentially, but I do appreciate that he's trying to do it, because I think even if they do, I think Meltzer had said, we have the Meltzer clip to talk about the. Let's hear Meltzer talk about it first.
Yeah, they essentially ask an over-under from Meltzer, but here's the clip.
Let's move over to AEW right now, because I'm dying to ask you this question. And you're good with AEW and predictions and I don't have a prediction and bets. But if I was to set the over-under for Wembley Stadium at 55,000, would you put the over or under?
Boy, I will say over, but we'll see. This is one of those things where if the frenzy hits, it may be incredible.
55. I'd be happy with that number. I think that would be, if you set up the camera the right way, make the big stage, because people are like, oh, Wembley in 1992 for SummerSlam did 95,000. No, guys, it was 81. So it was a huge crowd, no doubt about it. But let's not act like it was like that number is the number that they want to reach. They're not going to get 81,000 though.
No. And you brought up, the doing Craven Cottage, Tony's soccer stadium. They've, from all reports, they had their pre-sale where you can sign up for the pre-ticket sale for All In. They reportedly have 25,000 people already signed up. So they would have sold out. They would have sold out Craven Cottage like that in the pre-sale. So it's like, if you've already got that amount of people that signed up within 24 hours of the event being announced, you've got a good head start. You've got a really good head start. And another thing to think about, Ace, is like when they came to New York, for the first time, New York City proper, when they came to Arthur Ashe, it sold out like wildfire. Like what was it? 20,000, 21,000?
I believe it just above 20.
Okay. So they hit that. The reason it was so rabid, it was a new market. You know what I mean? Like when they enter these new markets, they sell really well. Like when the attendance was kind of lowering and they brought Jeff Jarrett in for the, to kind of tap into these new venues and things. And they did their little West Coast run. If you remember those shows in Washington and Oregon, those crowds were hot because they had never been there before. So now take London. You're not entering a new city in America. You're entering a new country. You're entering a place where the Brits have not had a chance to see live All Elite Wrestling. That is going to make them hungry to be there, where I think they're going to at least bare minimum double what they've done in the States.
Yeah, I definitely think that is the goal, but I think shooting for the moon and making this card as best as possible. And there's been conjecture about what the card should look like. Obviously, I think the matches should be done in-house. You don't want to bring in something that isn't the AEW product. People mentioned Goldberg and, things that would cater to the casual fan. That's not the goal here. And I think the thing you mentioned about not going to this marketing shooting small, I think that's absolutely correct. Because if you go back to the LA shows where they went for the smaller venues instead of a big venue, would they have been able to sell out the soccer stadium and where the LA Galaxy play? Who knows? But I think the initial show is when it's hottest, because we watched the second Grand Slam. We watched the Dynamites in New York after they ran the market a few times. The interest wanes. I mean, I went to the UBS Dynamite just last Wednesday. The crowd was significant. And I know it's not the same as Queens. Like, there's a big difference for everyone from New York. The difference between Queens and Long Island, it's different. But the crowd was definitely not as passionate about the product, not as informed about the product. But I think for the UK to shoot for that first show to be this giant show and then come back for Craven Cottage, where you can create that atmosphere, because there's something to be said about the smaller atmosphere that Craven Cottage would have, and having people singing and chanting and everything that goes into the UK crowd. I think really what he's going for is that pageantry, that opening shot where it pans off the room. You're having pyro, and that goes into the Dynamite lore of what he tried to bring originally. This is huge. This is, Nitro going to the Georgia Dome with Goldberg and selling it out. This is on par with a lot of historical events in wrestling history. And if they could pull this off, similar to the first All In, when there were doubts, where people like, oh, could all these wrestlers get together and sell out an arena? Well, they did it. And Meltzer was a part of that. We're all week. And Meltzer now set the bar over 55. And this could be huge for wrestling.
Absolutely. And this stadium show is also a big feather in the cap of Tony Khan and their legitimacy. If you see a company that can put on a big show at a big successful show at Wembley, and you're a top tier talent in WWE or Impact Wrestling or New Japan, and you see like, man, okay, they can do big too. They can do pageantry on a large scale too. Maybe, 20 years from now, if Wembley All In becomes this thing and they return, or All In becomes this big stadium level event that's done annually, maybe they get to a point where that is their mania, their own, mania is mania, but maybe that becomes their thing every year. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very appealing to a talent when you're looking at getting your brand out there and having those massive spectacle moments in stadiums. Right now, WWE is the only place that you can wrestle in front of 70, 80,000 people. Right. Like not a lot of places, none are really doing it to that level. So my question to you, we know he's going to pull out. This card is what I'm excited for. If you're trying to do a 90,000 seat arena, he's going to try and pull out all the stops to fill that arena, which means you're going to have dream matches. You're going to have extremely compelling stories going into this. It can't just be dream matches, and it can't just, you have to have like the best of the best. What do you think he pulls out, man? What's your early predictions of what do you think we're going to see on this card to drive 90,000 people, hopefully, into this place?
Well, I think we're going to see the return of Punk before this, and I think Punk has to play a part. Like, he is the biggest star you have in the company. So if anything puts bad feelings aside, it's having this success in your mind. And I think having Punk at Wembley Stadium in some capacity is paramount for its success. I really believe that. I think AEW has to pull out all the stops, use all the players as possible. So your biggest stars need to be there. And I think the biggest potential dream match between the two of them is Kenny Omega, CM Punk. Like, I think that match speaks for itself. And
I think so too.
Throw FTR versus the Bucks for the tag titles, and then sprinkle in Will Ospreay if he's healthy enough to be on the card, and maybe use that. I think Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega is going to happen at Forbidden Door. So we're going to have the option of like, all right, well, they should do Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega too. I don't think this is the place for it. I think you need to throw a dream match that is an AEW landscape, and it's Punk versus Omega. Like, I think that's the match where the build, the outside stuff brings into it. And we've seen these guys seem to be the coolest out of everybody at this point. Like, even though they were the ones directly involved in the fight and Kenny, like, they seem like they've buried the hatchet. It's a matter of just getting Punk in the room and saying, this is what we're building towards. Look at this. Show them 1992 SummerSlam, the crowd, the noise. The thing I want to mention is this feels like a space race type of thing for Tony Khan, where he wants to get back to Wembley before WWE did.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that WWE, they've been running UK. And of course, Cardiff was insane. That venue was absolutely insane. But the significance of the 1992 SummerSlam for a wrestling fan, for Tony to be doing that's going to be surreal. He's going to be sitting in Gorilla at that point, walking, doing the run on that day, knowing the history on the ground. I know it's not the same building, but for Brett and British Bulldog main eventing for the IC title, that crowd, man, there might be a UK flair to it, of course. Like, I think there's going to be a big star from the UK, and I think Nigel McGuinness is going to do a lot of the promotion stuff. But man, it's surreal to think about AEW is going to be the wrestling promotion that goes back for the first time since 1992.
It blew my mind when they announced this and they said first wrestling event here in 30 years. And I'm like, hold on. WWE hasn't been back since SummerSlam. It shocked me because I guess, you're not thinking about something like that. When I hear the Wembley Stadium is one of those names that it's an iconic, it's a very iconic stadium. You know what I mean?
Yankee Stadium for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. So for them not to have returned there and Tony to be that guy, it's shocking to me. But Punk Omega, you want to talk about that would, if they do book Punk Omega, I think they do 60, 70 at least. Easy. If you bring back Punk at Double or Nothing in a shocking return in a big way, and he states his claim, and we get an entire summer run up to All In for that match, and we never get them in the ring, and you're just building and building towards that match at All In. Yeah, you're going to do something. Plus, you have the possibility of Mercedes Moné out there you can bring in. There's reports, I'm not buying it, but there are reports that Drew McIntyre's contract situation, who knows? He could be locked up until the end of the year. We don't know.
You don't know the exact dates, but that'd be amazing.
Imagine if there was some sort of serendipitous thing with Drew McIntyre coming to Wembley in a large role. I don't think that'll happen, but who knows? That's the type of stuff we're going to see Tony pull for. Is he's going to try to pull out the big guns.
Yeah, and he's familiar with this audience too, because you mentioned Fulham. He's tapped into the financials, the analytics that goes into what sells out and what is linked in with social media presence. Like, again, this is a calculated risk that he's pulling, and I appreciate swinging for the fences here. It's not, he could have easily, like you mentioned, sold out Craven Cottage for 2 nights for Dynamite and have this amazing optic and have it look a certain way and the fans would be rabid. But I think he's really putting the chips in the middle of the table, and you want to use the poker euphemisms and talk about all the symbolism of Double or Nothing and All In. The origin of AEW was taking a huge risk like this, because forget Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, the Bucks, everyone involved in the All In show, the original, that was done without, this is the first time ever, and probably we'll ever see in our lifetime, of a promotionless venue having all these rabid fans. And it created a movement. It created a new company. It created an option for wrestling fans. And the significance of All In, to me, that is the turning point of my wrestling fandom. I was all the way back in. I was so to see the guys driving towards, you know what, we can do this. We're driving the narrative of what wrestling is going to be, not just written by WWE whitewashing what they want it to be. We are creating what we want it to look like in the future. And love, hate, or you're disinterested in AEW, you can't dismiss what All In achieved all the way those years back.
No, and I absolutely love the gusto of Tony Khan.
Hell yeah.
There's no there is absolutely no way that this guy didn't drop this announcement in a strategic fashion coming right off the heels of a WWE sale and a very successful Mania.
Yeah.
That's when all the eyes are on the wrestling product. And it's like he let them have their weekend. And then in the wake of a very successful wrestling weekend, he drops a bomb like, you just had your stadium show? Well, mine's coming up. Like, I love the gusto of that.
Yeah, and it's not a hedged bet. And I think at this point, Tony Khan is also understanding of the significance of this venue, of this country in wrestling history. So this wasn't just any random stadium show. The fact that it's at Wembley, this is just, you could show this. You print out the picture and bring it on a big, nice high res on a display board to show it to Warner Media, whoever wants the TV rights, and show what this show produced. Like the just, I keep using the word optic, but just being able to put those butts in seats and have someone that's not WWE putting all those people in front watching pro wrestling. It's happened before. It will happen again. We've seen obviously Shea Stadium, Yankee Stadium. We've seen bigger venues hold wrestling shows, but for someone at this level to do it with the amount of production and everything that will go into it, it's a huge move for AEW, and I'm here for it. I think it's great.
I'm so excited to I'm so excited to see this thing come together. Not only just the card. I mean, the card is going to be very interesting. And how does it relate to All Out?
Is it on pay-per-view?
Is it on pay-per-view? Is it free TV? I've heard people say, with the merger of HBO Max and Discovery Plus, that when those two merge is around the time that this is launching. So maybe this is kind of bait for wrestling fans to sign up for HBO Max if that's something coming in the near future for AEW. There's that. There's I want to see what their stage setup looks like. I want to see what the spectacle of it looks like. I mean, this will be a presentation that we have never seen from AEW on scale. I'm talking, obviously a lot of fans in the crowd, but I'm talking about just the scale of the stage, the scale of the ramp. What does all that look like? I'm so excited for that aspect of seeing this company dip their toe in the water of the stadium experience. I think it's very, very just exciting. Every aspect of it has me pumped up.
Tony Khan said, "Scared money don't make no money." And he said, "Hold my beer. I'm going to try this out." And dude, you go years back. I'm looking at the poster for the New Japan Super Show with Ring of Honor and MSG. He was in the building just as a fan.
Yep.
That I understand he was the benefit of a large sum of money that he was born into, but he's chasing his passion and he's changed the wrestling business for the better. Whether you like the product he's putting out, he's pushing WWE to the limit. And he deserves credit for what WWE was creating with the Bloodline because they were forced to, because there was competition that put him in that spot. So
the Bloodline was created from competition. Let's be honest. And all of this, like, he's got money. Yeah, he's just a rich guy. Like, it's not his fault. He was born into money.
100%.
He's a fan. For his like 13th or 14th birthday, the kid wanted his dad to take him to the corner of Swanson and Rittner in Philly to go see ECW. Like that rich kid, poor kid, middle class kid, it don't matter. The kid has been a wrestling fan, and thank God he's a wrestling fan with money. I remember like Joe Rogan at one long time ago made a statement where he was like, what the UFC needs is a super fan with an unlimited bank account to buy this company, and it could do big things. Enter the Fertittas and Dana White, huge combat sports fans with endless amounts of money, and they fucking reinvented that sport to what it is today. What did wrestling need? Wrestling needed competition with a super fan who loves pro wrestling with an endless amount of money, and we got that. We should all be thankful for it.
I agree with that. And, Tony Khan, I appreciate everything you've done for the wrestling business. I am rooting for you. I will be watching. I wish I could get on a plane and go to London because that atmosphere is going to be epic. So, wrestling fans should be excited for the landscape of wrestling, whether they're a fan of AEW or not. This is a huge barometer where the wrestling world is at. The fact that we're able to have two shows running stadiums, and we have WWE in London later that year in July or earlier in the year for Money in the Bank. So UK market getting a lot of love. They used to just get Insurrection and the one-off pay-per-views that had no storyline purposes. Now they're playing essential parts in wrestling storyline. That's good for the UK fans.
Don't be surprised if WWE pulls some shenanigans and tries to counter program or fuck this up for AEW. I think that's totally on the table for them to do.
With that being said, let's get into the third story here.
Big Story 3.
So we referenced this on Honor Society, but for those that did not watch, we had Jonathan Gresham in the news, and he was opening up about his time with Tony Khan and just the argument they had and their infamous meeting where Gresham walked out. And he was on the Nick Hausman, that famous Nick Hausman podcast, and he was talking about everything that went down. Obviously, we know John Gresham is involved with Impact Wrestling. His last match at ROH was that Claudio Castagnoli title match where it was almost a squash, his death before dishonor. And I remember when this went down, and it was interesting because John Gresham was a guy I circled as who they would build around. He is kind of the transition from the old guard to the new guard. He was part of the end of Ring of Honor, being that champion, carrying that belt through a very transitional, heartbreaking time for the ROH brand. And when he got there, I mean, obviously they put him over Bandito at Supercard of Honor the year before, and they put a lot of emphasis on him. And then it all went sideways, and it seemed like he lost his cool and he was not happy with what went down. He cataloged the events, essentially all the quotes make it clear that he was going through a tough time in his life, and he felt like he wasn't being heard from Tony Khan. But there was this misconception about only working for smaller promotions, not understanding the large scale of what Tony Khan has his hands in, not being able to acquiesce and have conversations. I think he has perspective now. I'm just glad they cleared the air, because at this point, Tony Khan could have been vindictive and said, all right, John Gresham, the bridge is burned. We don't want you involved with us anymore. That wasn't the case at all. The original story that came from this was they shook hands when they saw each other, and Tony Khan was nothing but endearing to him.
Yeah, I think Tony Khan even said, like, you haven't burned a bridge.
Yeah.
And, you know, when this story first popped, the big narrative was that Gresham didn't want to do the job.
Yes.
He didn't want to lose to Claudio, and it caused a big stink in the back, and there was yelling. I remember the report was that he was yelling at people and kind of coming across as unhinged, and he caught a lot of shit from that from fans. So I love that he came out and kind of clarified what actually went down. And I'm with you, man. I was a big fan of Gresham. He was definitely cut from that, like, technical guy, not the most charismatic superstar level kind of guy, but ROH seemed like, man, you could build that company around him and just make him a killer. But I do think, you know, with him, with the Tony Khan situation, and like you talked about, he's only worked with GCWs, lower level promotions. You gotta temper. There was almost like an ego thing going on where it's like, you flew me out here. You need to talk to me. I need to be spoke to. You know, and I get there's a lack of communication. That's not just AEW. You hear that in WWE where talent will sit outside of Vince's door for hours waiting to be heard. So I think at the high level, man, these promoters at the highest level, like Dana White, Vince McMahon, Tony Khan, those type of guys, Bob Arum in boxing, like those type of guys, they have their hands in so many things, and there's so many moving pieces that, you know, when you hear of Dana White talking to a fighter in UFC about a contract, it's a thing where they fly them out specifically to Vegas to have a meeting. It's not like, hey, at the event, let's have a conversation in the back. Like, maybe there's so many things happening at these events, especially for Tony. When this event was going on, this was when he's really trying to get ROH off the ground. There was probably so many moving parts. So I like that Gresham sees that he kind of overreacted to this, and he's what was his exact quote, Ace, about he felt like did he overstep? Or I think he said, I shouldn't have yelled or cursed in a professional environment. I deeply regret the behavior. So he knows he screwed up.
Yeah, and the thing is too that I appreciate about this, it's two grown men owning the situation and understanding that sometimes tempers flare and sometimes relationships they have challenging moments. But as a professional, John Gresham admitted he was wrong. And
Yeah.
he's not excusing his behavior. He just mentioned there was tough things going on in his life. His mom was hospitalized and things going on. And I'm sure he felt disrespected because ROH was his baby. He was the guy carrying that belt and he was being put on the opening match in the show and he was being squashed. And he had said it wasn't the fact that I was losing. It was the fact that I didn't have the opportunity to talk with Tony and I felt disrespected time and time again. And communication was more rapid. I'm sure in the old regime where it was a smaller show, they're running a smaller building that was just ROH, where Tony Khan doesn't have his hand in not only Fulham, but the NFL draft with the Jacksonville Jaguars and everything going on with TV negotiations and AEW. John Gresham didn't have that in his perspective, but I just love that two guys, for once in the wrestling business, it wasn't held as this grudge where, I mean, we see Simon Gotch and Enzo Amore. They're constantly talking about how they hate each other and things went down. This was a situation that was as heated as it probably gets. I mean, there wasn't fists thrown, but John Gresham was very animated. And we saw a lot of conversation about John Gresham being difficult to work with. But I was just happy to see him pop back up in wrestling. We saw him GCW not long after that, went to Impact, which I think is a great spot for him. But this left that door open because Tony Khan, as we know, progressive booker, willing to have relationships with GCW, Impact, New Japan Pro Wrestling. So he knew it's for his benefit of his career to be like, all right, I got to make amends with this guy. But he seems like he did it in a genuine way. It wasn't just this like, oh, agree to disagree. He admitted he was wrong and handled it poorly. And I just respect that from man to man. I think that's something that is missing in this world where someone just owns their behavior and owns their actions. It's not making excuses, but just saying, I'm going to try to be better.
Yeah, that's a thing that I can think of a few people that should take note of that. When we think of the brawl out, when we think of a best in the world guy living in Chicago right now, when I think about the Bucks, not saying that any of them are we don't know the situation, but it just shows you like, hey man, you can have a blowout, you can have a bad situation, you can admit you were wrong and do business again. And I fully see this guy returning to ROH in some capacity in the future. I mean, he's been killing it in Impact with a series of matches with Speedball Mike Bailey. They've just been tearing the house down. Yep. So I love that Gresham's there. I think Impact's a good place for him right now, but I like that, him and Tony have kind of, Gresham's admitted he was wrong, and Tony, upon leaving that event, Tony was like, hey man, no bad blood, no bridges burned. You can make your way back here. I think that's good. And time heals all, man. I think, you get hot in the moment and you have these feelings and you think you're the one being wronged. And then as time goes by, you gain perspective. You get to look back and be like, well, maybe I could have done that differently. And I think this is wrestling needs more of this.
Yeah, it's a good commentary on how situations should be handled and how just owning your shit can sometimes change the course of what's going to happen. And the fact that John Gresham he could have easily just said, Tony Khan is a dick. He didn't allow me to do X, Y, and Z. And he could have just absolutely just buried the guy, but he didn't, and had the perspective of, hey, like, I need to look from his lens of how busy he is and having the idea of everything that goes into running a business. It's not, relationships are a two-way street. You need to have a conversation. And I think John Gresham has shown his ability to be like, all right, I was wrong and I'm willing to do this. And Tony Khan too, like we've seen bookers and vindictive personalities in wrestling, just like, you know what, the guy wronged me. I'm going to not allow him back in. We've seen Eric Bischoff have certain vendettas against guys. And that's just through history's lens of saying who he didn't want to book. And he held history on. And we've even seen Vince take guys on that he almost had a vendetta where like now he's bringing him in to bury him in as far as legacy goes. I just appreciate it. I love John Gresham. I think he's a great asset to whatever promotion he's in. I think he fits perfectly with Impact, but I would love to see him back in ROH.
I'm with you. And I think he made a wise decision having this perspective and doing this, because most times, there are people that this doesn't apply to. There's always an exception to the rule, but I don't think holding grudges like this add any type of it sets you up for failure, in my opinion. Like most highly successful people can move past things and do business in any form. I'm not just talking about wrestling. Like most highly successful people have a way of moving past things and working past things. I think people that dig their heels down, on a grudge and just a lot of times you don't see those guys flourish because if they're holding that grudge like that, it usually ripples through other aspects of their life. And holding on to negativity like that isn't good for anyone. And for him to move past it, I love it because hopefully, we'll see him in ROH again.
Yeah, it's unhealthy to hold grudges, and I think it's important for your mental space and mental health to just let that place be very forgiving and owning your shit too. Just own your shit. Let's get into quick hitters. Let's own that shit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Quick hitters.
All right, so for the first news in quick hitters, we had a nice show at the Sumo Hall in Japan, Sakura Genesis, and we had some title changes. So in a massive upset, Sonata is now your IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Sonata is a guy who won the New Japan Cup back in 2023 and obviously earlier this year. He hit Okada with his deadfall finisher for the pin to win the title, and this was a shocking development where Okada was giving a lot as this build up, and Okada is a legendary status, and it doesn't change what his standing in the company is. To me, I understand winning the New Japan Cup was a precursor to doing this, and maybe if someone was following the New Japan product exclusively, they would see this coming. I got to say, when I saw this match booked at Genesis, I was like, there's no way that Sonata goes over. Seeing the result, I was shocked.
I mean, Okada going down to I couldn't believe they made this move. I mean, anytime I'm not extreme, like I'm not the biggest diehard New Japan knowing the ins and outs of it, but the level of fan that I am, when I see Okada losing a title to someone, to me, that's a coronation type thing. That's a passing of the torch thing. That's a you just got made type of thing. So I was kind of shocked that Sonata got that from New Japan. What do you think about this, Ace? Do they see something in this guy or what's up?
I mean, I think they do see something in him, especially being a New Japan Cup winner. And this is weird for me because this is only Okada's second reign as champion, and it ends only after 2 defenses. So 94 days didn't seem like a long time for Okada. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe Okada's taking some time off. But after the win, Sonata immediately had his next opponent lined up, where his former LIJ stablemate Hiromu Takahashi came out. And he wants a future world heavyweight title belt. And Takahashi is not a guy that would be historically or in that spot. So having Sonata and Takahashi, yes, it's refreshing. I don't know. So we're going to get some future outlines of what these cards look like. Is Sonata a drawing card? For me, not really. I mean, I do think he has a good work rate. I think the match with Okada was good. I don't know. I don't see what people are seeing, but I'll follow the product and see if it pans out. But we also had another champion change hands, and we had my favorite tag team in the world right now, Aussie Open, win the IWGP tag titles, and Kyle Fletcher and Mark Davis defeated Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi. This was the first time that they're holding these titles. I was personally hoping that Aussie Open would win the ROH tag titles in the Reach for the Sky ladder match, but we got Fletcher pinning Goto, hitting the Coriolis, and this is Aussie Open's highest profile victory to date. I know they wrestled FTR in a losing effort, and they've been involved in some good matches in ROH, but this was I wouldn't say coronation, but it definitely was an accolade that they could be very proud of, because holding these titles, they are prestigious. And I know that FTR is probably the most notable team to hold them in people's minds. And they, Goto and Yoshihashi won at Wrestle Kingdom and took the titles from FTR. But this is a huge win for Aussie Open. And I like that. I love the relationship. Obviously, Aussie Open involved in United Empire and everything going on with Will Ospreay and Jeff Cobb. And they've been prominently featured on New Japan television. But this was a huge feather in the cap, for lack of a better word, for Fletcher and Davis. And they deserve it.
I think it is a coronation. This team has been quietly becoming one of the best teams in the world over the last year or two. when they had that FTR match, I feel that put them on the radar of a lot of fans that maybe aren't super diehard New Japan fans. And Aussie Open deserve it, man. I think this is a big thing for them to be able to say, hey, we were the IWGP champions. This elevates them in the eyes of the public.
So also on this show, Mercedes Moné retained her IWGP Women's Championship. Zack Sabre retained his World TV Championship, and Takahashi retained the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. So interesting that Takahashi's involved in the junior heavyweight stuff, and he has opponents that he needs to be worried about, but he's also staking claim to potentially taking Sonata's World Championship. So they're shaking up what's happening in New Japan. And I know that the level of stardom in New Japan, it goes through ebbs and flows where they're the hottest product, where they have all this great talent. I think this is another one of those lull periods. I want to, it's putting in sporting terms, rebuilding a bit to try to restructure exactly who's coming over. And
I think Sonata, we're seeing them try to make stars. Like that's what we're seeing right now is they're trying to establish new stars. I mean, even like Finley in Bullet Club, like they're trying to establish a new leader. I feel like across the board in New Japan, they're trying to elevate a lot of the guys they have into bigger positions.
So we are a post New Japan without Jay White, and we have obviously Jay White's lineages with the Bullet Club, and we had Bullet Club attacking El Phantasmo, and they tossed El Phantasmo from the faction. So this was interesting as well. And Bullet Club has always been in flux, and there's been different eras of Bullet Club. You go down with, Prince Devitt, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, Jay White,
Styles.
AJ Styles is a different era. And this is just the latest edition of the layered faction that is Bullet Club. And will they ever reach the heights they did prior to AEW? Probably not, but this is their latest attempt to having a new popularity and refreshing it. The brand is still there. Bullet Club's very popular, but it reminds me of the NWO, like when NWO was filtering out, but they're trying their best to reinvigorate it.
And the thing that I find interesting about this angle with them booting out Phantasmo is we had on the debate maybe a month or so ago, we had one of the fellas from Brainbuster Boys on, who is a diehard in the weeds New Japan guy. And at the time, this was when Jay White was leaving. And one of the questions we posed was, who is going to take over Bullet Club? Who's going to be the next guy up? And guy from Brainbuster Boys said he thinks El Phantasmo's that guy. They're going to elevate him. And now they bring David Finlay in. He becomes that guy, and they kick El Phantasmo out. Phantasmo just wasn't one of the guys. He was a featured member. He was pretty big. And I think we're leading to something with, Finlay has said in press that all the other offshoots of the Bullet Club are just cosplayers. Now we have Juice Robinson, we have Jay White in AEW saying they are an offshoot of the Bullet Club. They've got the music, they've got the video package on the Contron, and now you've got Finlay making statements like that. I think all roads are leading to some sort of Bullet Club clash at Forbidden Door 2, because this is the 10th year anniversary of the Bullet Club's inception. What better way to celebrate 10 years of Bullet Club than Bullet Club clashing at Forbidden Door?
Yeah, from the outside looking in, and again, I follow New Japan Pro Wrestling like not as closely as AEW, WWE, but I am watching the big events like Genesis and Dominion and Wrestle Kingdom. David Finlay is the next guy. Like I think he's the guy who's going to get the rocket put on him, similar to how Kenny Omega leaving led to Jay White being pushed up. I think David Finlay is the guy they recognize as this guy who could be their main eventer. And maybe he's eventually, like Sonata is holding the world title, waiting for David Finlay to take it and have this huge run at the helm with Bullet Club. And I think that's going to happen down the line, but they're biding their time. And they always, and Gato has a good indication of what he would do in the future. And you could just look to the past of these other stars, not traditionally Japanese main stars like an Okada or a Tanahashi. The way they book outsiders, whether Canadian, American, or British or whatever, it doesn't matter. They book them in a similar way, dominant. And I think David Finlay will be dominant in the upcoming months. And probably by Wrestle Kingdom, by January, I think he's going to have his coronation if he's not champion already.
Right. Yeah.
So we have the WWE draft is set to return in just a matter of weeks. So on Friday, SmackDown, Triple H came out and put over the success of WrestleMania. And he cut 2 promos this week. The first one on Raw was like, things aren't changing.
Everything's fine, guys. Everything's fine.
When businesses say that, the one thing you can know is things are changing and things are not fine. But
yeah.
This is the first time the draft's going to be returning since October of 2021, where WWE didn't do the draft last year. And I saw you in the group chat ripping on the draft. And I agree. It means nothing now, especially since there's guys that go over willy-nilly at this point, which I like. But a few weeks, we're going to get the draft. And I don't know. What is the meaning of the draft if there's no brand exclusivity at all?
This is just a formality, ratings grab. Hey, this Raw is going to be special because we're going to be drafting the new rosters. Dude, how about just putting everyone in a pool and making stories from everyone that branches across 2 episodes or 2 television shows on Monday and Friday night? Like, do you know how much better it would be if brand exclusivity was gone in WWE? Like, if you just had a pool of guys, all the roster together, and you could just continue the story from Raw into SmackDown. They don't have to all be, everyone says, well, if you put them all together, people are going to get left out. People aren't going to be used. I call bullshit on that. Like, it's all in how you roll out your stories. You could easily have, some guys featured more heavily on SmackDown. You tell certain stories there, but I don't like this. Like, I feel like the draft is such a meaningless thing. Like, they do this. And like you said, roster floats back and forth. They do this. Like, we had a trade. We traded this person. Like, stop treating me like I'm a child. Just tell your stories and stop with this bullshit.
So speaking of WWE, and we kind of see this, and you can use the UFC historical reference of the original sale, is making profitability the utmost importance. And what goes with that is people that get left out and released, and a hiring freeze. So Fightful Select has shared backstage news regarding WWE hiring new talent. And according to a report by Fightful, the talent that spoke with Fightful are claiming that the company is going through a hiring freeze because so far this year, the promotion has not been hiring any main roster talent. We'll talk in a second about maybe Vince's part in this. This is not surprising to me. And with a sale and someone taking over, they want to really look at what the importance of everybody's role is. And the other thing people don't consider about this merger with UFC and WWE is that you have people doing the same job, where like the HR and the people doing promotional stuff, you still probably want to have 2 different houses working on those things, but maybe and I'm sure they're looking at it, to take a person that's making whatever amount of money they're making and combining the jobs, because you might not need 2 of everything.
Yeah. I mean, any corporate takeover, any downsizing situation, moving into another corporate environment from one, they're going to try and make certain positions work more and get paid the same. When you go, when Endeavor looks into how everything's ran, that's when they restructured. That's what they're going to be doing, is like, okay, who do we need? Who do we not need? Okay, with the people, can we combine these jobs? Can we have this person do 2 things and save money by not having to pay another person? I mean, that's what it's all about. And the hiring freeze, it just makes sense because you want this new company to come in clean. Yeah. Like, and once everything's set, then you can ramp up the, free agent searches, the new signings and all of that.
We also had Paul Heyman on an Ariel Helwani interview, our favorite podcaster here, talking about the finish, and everyone's critiquing that maybe Cody Rhodes is on the short end of the stick. Maybe he's on the downhill slide. We have a clip from Paul Heyman talking about Cody Rhodes in his future.
The response tonight to Cody Rhodes, which was louder than the response last week to Cody Rhodes, which was a response more passionate tonight for Cody Rhodes, which was a response of an audience that believes in Cody Rhodes this week more than they did last week when they hung their hopes and their dreams on him, and he didn't disappoint them. We disappointed them We took that away from Cody Rhodes. Roman Reigns took that away from Cody Rhodes and the audience, and they blame Roman Reigns for it, and they appreciate how close Cody came, and they know now, the next time Cody Rhodes steps in the ring with Roman Reigns, this will be the one. That's the business. That's the business at its very best. That's promotion at its very best. That's storytelling at its very best. That's what you want. You want the challenger to come out a bigger star than he would have been if he had won the championship, because then where do you go from there? What's the story to tell? Now you know the story. It's Cody's redemption. He's coming back from what was just taken from him, from the defeat that he suffered that he didn't deserve to have inflicted upon him.
All right, Chad, we're a week removed from this. How are you feeling? Do you think Paul Heyman's onto something, or do you think that it's still a chance that they didn't pull the trigger fast enough?
I think whatever they chose to do, they could have made work. I like Cody being knocked down a peg and having to work. They could have pulled the trigger and it could have worked. I do like that Roman retained. But it kills me because all of the people, Heyman says it here. I've heard, I think Triple H said it in his post press conference at Mania, and you're hearing other people. It's like, well, if Cody would have won, then what would there would have been no story. That's such a cop out bullshit response to me. The story could have been there. You could have shot an angle. There could have been something there. Like, it's wrestling. Anything you choose to be the story is the story. The story ends with Cody and Roman. Maybe there's a rematch. I don't understand this. Like, what was next? There would be no story for Cody if he would have won. Stop treating me like a fool. There could be story either way. Randy Orton could have ran in. There could have been a Roman rematch. Roman and the downfall of the bloodline could have happened. Like, I like that Roman won, but this whole narrative that if Roman would have lost, the story would have ended, I think is horseshit.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling is built on the fallout, and like you said, I think the story is yet to be told as far as the downfall of Roman, and we haven't seen the Roman Empire completely crumble around him. Obviously, the Usos lost their title, so he's still sort of finding his way, and he came out unscathed. And like I saw someone talk about how like every main event of Roman Reigns, they pull something away from him. He comes a little bit closer to losing. He's almost like a big bad guy where you have to defeat him in many different ways in different battles before you can actually culminate in it. And like you said, with a week removed from this, the Cody Rhodes loss doesn't sting as bad. But like, you're right. There's story to be told with Cody as champion. Would it be as layered and meaningful and important as the Bloodline story? No. But that's also, you go in with that perspective, it's of course not going to be as good. So
plus, let's be honest, Paul Heyman he said, that's wrestling, that's promoting. He is essentially Roman Reigns' promoter.
Right.
He's going to do whatever he can to milk Roman for everything. And I think that is what WWE is doing right now, is making Roman one of the greatest of all time in the eyes of kayfabe.
Yep.
And by doing, and I'm not just saying they're only servicing Roman. I do think by making Roman that level, if Cody is the man to finally dethrone him, it does make Cody extremely more important than he currently is.
So move on to the NWA, and on their 312 pay-per-view on Friday night, we have a new national heavyweight champion in EC3. Kenzie Page won the first ever inaugural women's TV title. So we saw EC3 defeat Scion to win the title for the first time. He made him submit with the crossface. Scion held the championship for almost, a significant amount of time. He didn't quite cross that threshold of a year, but 224 days is nothing to blink at here.
It's a good run.
Yeah. So the national heavyweight championship, big deal for EC3. And later in the show, Thrillbilly Silas won the Bob Luce Memorial Battle Royal. He's going to receive a future shot against EC3. As I mentioned before, Kenzie Page became the inaugural women's television champion, defeating Max the Impaler to become the first champion. NWA, not sure the buy rate yet, or as far as feedback, it was a quiet thing on there and didn't hear much about them in the wrestling world. And there was a buzz about them for a bit, but it feels like they are in a lull.
They are in a lull. I think when the Ricky Starks and Eddie Kingstons and all those guys left during the pandemic and NWA shuttered their doors, that really hurt them. I do think they are building themselves up with Cardona and Bully Ray, and you mentioned Thrillbilly Silas. Keep an eye on that kid, man. He's old school wrestler. He looks like $1 million. He looks like a Gordy from the Fabulous Freebirds. He reminds me of one of those big old school dudes. He's got a character to him, Southern wrestling kind of in his blood. He's going to be a star for them. I think he'll eventually end up in a big promotion too. And Kenzie Page, props to her for winning the TV championship, because, you know, I remember when she was just taking dark matches on AEW Dark. So Kenzie Page, Tom Pritchard student, good to see a young wrestler get some love.
So speaking of big dudes, we got Drew McIntyre. You mentioned this during the big two with AEW Wembley Stadium, but there's been some conversation about Drew McIntyre being unhappy. And this was coming from Wade Keller of the PW Torch, saying that WWE and Drew are not anywhere close to a new contract agreement. They talk about him being unhappy with his current situation. It's a mix of creative and money and what is being offered for renewal. And Wade Keller said, it sounds like WWE is taking seriously the possibility that he's going to let his deal run out rather than agree to something that he believes is less than he deserves or less than what he thinks he has coming. All right. So conversation here. You posted that question on the Turnbuckle Tavern Instagram page. We got a lot of love there. Drew McIntyre is a big piece of what they were doing. They gave him a lot. They've invested a lot in him. He got the big win over Lesnar. And of course he was one of the fallout, similar to being the world champion. A lot of world champions. Jon Moxley was one of them during the pandemic era of wrestling, where he didn't get his moment in front of fans. You thought he'd get a Clash at the Castle, but he was another guy who fell victim to the bigger story, which is Roman's reign and continuing going through. And maybe the decision to have Drew win the championship in Cardiff would have been the decision. Not sure about that. As conversation for another time. Drew was sent home from SmackDown, but Meltzer had said it's due to a medical situation. Do you see Drew McIntyre getting back to the Indies or anywhere else? AEW, Impact, is Drew Galloway, or do you think his stock is so raised in WWE that they can't let him go?
I don't know if they can't. I don't see him as a guy that's like, we got to hang on to this guy no matter what. Like, I don't think there's very many of those guys in WWE. Right. I think there's Roman and anyone else I could see leaving. I really could at a certain point in their career. I don't think anyone, maybe Seth is a lifer, but shit, man, I've seen supposed lifers leave. So Drew, people forget that he did go out on the independents and rebuild his name.
He did the Cody thing before Cody did it.
Yeah, he did Cody before Cody, you know, and I think a thing that's interesting to me right now that I don't think a lot of people are talking about is the fact that Roman's, for lack of a better word, reign at the top as this unbeatable champion, it is preventing a lot of top guys from being the figurehead of that company. And I know it's all scripted stuff, you know, like the titles and winning don't mean a lot to these guys. They're getting their payday, but they do want a good spot. But the thing with, they want their payday. When you're the champion, you're making all the money. So it's not about winning and losing and holding the belt. It's more of, when you're the champion, you are the moneymaker. You are bringing in more cash. You are getting paid more. It's a contractual, leverage tool, you know, that you're the guy. And I think when you have someone at the top, when contracts come up, unless you're a guy who just wants a payday and just wants to show up and you don't want to be the guy, the Seth Rollins, we've heard him complain that he wants to be the guy. He wants to be Roman. He doesn't want to be the Randy Orton to John Cena. He wants to be the guy. Does Drew want to be that guy? He was that guy during the pandemic, but he never got the love afterwards. Like you said, he's caught in this Roman thing. So it's going to be interesting to see these top guys. If Roman continues to reign, do they feel they could be the face of another company, or is the industry leader in sports entertainment enough for them just to be on that roster and make money? Is that enough for them, or do they want to be the man?
So another guy who fell victim to the Roman reign back in the day, I mean, months and months ago at this point, Finn Balor. And we obviously saw the injury he suffered at WrestleMania with the nasty head cut, where he received 14 staples in real time during the match. But Balor revealed on Instagram he was dealing with more than just that, because he suffered a grade 2 calf tear on the March 10th episode of SmackDown leading up to WrestleMania. And though the normal recovery time for the injury is about 6 to 8 weeks, he was able to rehab the injury and get in the ring for WrestleMania in less than, I think it was 3. So, 3 or 4. And the injury happened, he's saying, in a 6-man tag match where Judgment Day faced Legado del Fantasma. And he's been dealing with it. And he apparently, he showed that reel where he was walking in a boot, and the fact that he got in the ring, especially now that spot too, where he does the coup de grace off the top of that, through that table, like maybe he just need to do that for himself. But
yeah,
damn, Finn Balor's a warrior. And, you know, as much as that hurt him during the Roman reign where he lost as the Demon and the rope broke in that anime laden match, which was not my cup of tea. Finn Balor and Judgment Day has been pleasantly surprising. And I do enjoy what they're doing. And Finn Balor is another aspect of it.
Yeah, tough as nails. Always been a big fan of Finn Balor. He's definitely upped his stock with Judgment Day a little bit. I've always thought they've never got behind him like I think he could be the man in that company if they wanted to make him, but he's always kind of been underutilized in my opinion.
Yeah, he never really recovered from that shoulder injury after becoming the first ever Universal Champion. It's been, you know, one of those things where he's been climbing since then. But we have a guy who was the guy, and a new WWE documentary series in the works with John Cena called WWE Recruits. It's going to be exclusive to the Roku channel. John Cena is going to be producing and appearing in it. It's going to be an 8-episode series focusing on young athletes in WWE's developmental system as they chase their dream of becoming a WWE wrestler. And similar to Tough Enough, I'm assuming, but John Cena is going to be an advocate, and I'm sure it will be watchable. Not something I'm going to be seeking out, because this market has been saturated as far as I don't really need to see WWE's version of this.
No, I mean, I'll check it out. I'm a sucker for that type of trash TV when it in pro wrestling, but I really missed the show they used to have on the network. I believe it was called Breaking Ground.
Oh, it was great.
Where that was one of my favorite shows they ever put on, where you follow NXT talent. But if it's a little bit like Breaking Ground, I would be into it. But yeah, it is an oversaturated form.
So WWE let go a longtime employee, and AEW scooped them up. And this was a quiet hire that a lot of times that we don't look at and say this is a big thing, but it is a big, big thing as far as production goes, especially as we saw the outreach of love from all the talent that worked with Adam from AEW, and Hopkins is now for TK's promotion. He said to have started on the road at AEW and was present for last week's show. Hopkins, dude, he was with WWE since 1997, and he was a fan services coordinator who's promoted on multiple occasions throughout his time and was named VP of Communications in February 2022. He left for undisclosed reasons back in January. We don't know his role or what he's going to be doing in AEW, but we do know a guy who is lauded for his professionalism, his interactions. We saw talent. Big E came out and talked about his interactions with Hopkins, among a lot of different other WWE talent. Go out and see it. This is a huge get for AEW because it's a huge loss for WWE.
Yeah, this is a huge hire. Like you said, fans don't think about these hires. I think when me and Sneed discussed this on the flagship, I kind of related. Hires like this are like offensive linemen in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody buys their jerseys. Nobody thinks of the most offensive linemen, but they are integral to the running of a team. And I think building your backstage people with experienced individuals who have done it successfully at the highest level, that's how you elevate your company. So I love moves like this. I think the Mike Mansouri hire
Exactly.
they had a couple months ago. That was another big one. So things like this are huge for AEW.
So we have more information about the merger between UFC and WWE and Endeavor involved, and we got some indications about how they will be running. And the interesting part was Mark Shapiro, who's Endeavor's president, was on the Sports Business Journal's interview show. John Arrond is the guy who runs the show. The main quote that everyone pulling away is he said he's going to be running a playbook similar to growing WWE sponsorship, similar to UFC. And we all look at the playbook. It's pay-per-view driven. Last night, it's the prelims on ESPN Plus, and then you pay for the big event being the main event. And he said that's the strategy. That's how it successfully has played out for the UFC over the last 6 years. Remember when we bought it for $4.1 billion? People thought that price was crazy. Now it's valued at $12.1 billion. I mean, what a story. We hope to do the same thing with WWE. He also said that 80% of WWE's net revenues come from media segment. And he said during the rest of this that, again, they're looking at every aspect of running the UFC playbook. And he said the opportunity to put Vince in his creative head with Dana and Ari is going to create a significant amount of value for the shareholders. This is a quote that, like, I don't think we need to look at it. They're telling us what the plan is. They're going to be running the UFC playbook. So things are changing. They're going to create content for the sake of content. We talk about saturating the market. They're going to be saturating the market and then making you pay for the bigger things that are worth it.
Absolutely. You're going to see the Peacock deal, network, whatever you want to call it. They're going to saturate that with quote unquote PLEs, premium live events, whatever that matters. You're going to see the marquee shows go into a pay-per-view model, and you're going to see them do exactly what UFC does. You're going to see probably a pre-show with matches leading up to kind of hook you. And then for the big Cody Roman matches, those type of level, you're going to have to pay for it.
Open the wild, I don't know. $70.
Yeah. I'll be shocked if they go the $80 model for their pay-per-views, because I think that's really alienating your fan base. Now, if they want to try the $40, $50 model, AEW does $50 a pay-per-view. If they go that model, maybe it's a little sustainable. But the thing you got to think of, AEW has 4, 5, if you count Forbidden Door, pay-per-views that you have to pay for. I don't feel as bad shelling out $50 a quarter, you know. But if you're going to make me shell out $50, $60 a month, oh man, I don't know if I can do that. But there are WWE hardcores that'll pay whatever just to get the product. So.
Yeah, and the interesting approach is going to be see how they handle things, because I think Meltzer was talking about in Wrestling Observer Radio, just the model and how wrestling has changed, because pay-per-view buy rates and getting people to buy into your card and creating the best possible matches for the environment doesn't really matter in WWE anymore. Their cards are set and they're going to do what they want to do, and they don't have to worry about buy rates in that way. And I understand guaranteed money is guaranteed money, and whoever is going to get the streaming deal, because I'm not seeing the streaming going away. As you mentioned, I think it's going to be shifted into more of a hybrid. It's not just going to be fully streaming. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of pay-per-view based, but I think really what's going to be driven is if you want people to have to buy the pay-per-view, you have to put the best card together. And they haven't had to do that for a while. And I know they've been putting on really good shows, but they had the benefit of just guaranteed money. You can do whatever you want on the card, and people, they're either going to pay the subscription or they're not. It's not based on, I want to buy this month, I'm going to sit out that month.
That's a great silver lining positive take on this, Ace, is that you just said, is that there is the chance that putting their big shows under a pay-per-view model would have to make creative Vince, Triple H, whoever, really build these cards.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, if you're charging between $50 and $80 for a pay-per-view and you're just throwing matches on there, it's going to hurt you. You know, you have to pull out all the stops to make people put their dollar down. So that maybe a pay-per-view model improves the creativity. Who knows?
Unless it's just sprinkles on top of the Sunday, because they may be getting the same amount of money for the Peacock deal, guaranteed money, and they don't have to put all their events. It's going to be on top of it. So if they get
right.
Similar, because obviously with inflation, we're assuming that they're going to get more money than they got from NBC, and they negotiated where NBC put so much effort into establishing Peacock based on WWE's live programming, like content for the sake of content. Like there's nothing like a live show that's consistent, and we see that with UFC. It's a different entertainment source, because it's not. We watched the main event go 2 rounds and a knockout last night, so it's not about match quality. It's about matchups, and I think getting people interested in your storytelling. You know, we talk about WWE is going to be running UFC's playbook, but UFC has been running WWE's playbook of promotion and getting people, excited about. You have these guys people hate, you have these guys that people get behind. The underdog story. It's tales all this time. It's pro wrestling.
Yeah, they're like we said last week when we went deep into it. UFC and WWE are, if you go back in the history books, they're a lot more interlocked than fans realize.
100%. So we have a quote from Dana White talking about the details of the WWE UFC merger on the Pat McAfee show, which, again, I love the Pat McAfee show. He brings the best out of a lot of different guys that are usually clammed up. Dana White is usually a guy who speaks a lot, but if he doesn't like you, he's not going to give you a lot. But think about the Vince interview, the Brock interview. Pat McAfee's masterful at his job.
Yeah. Here's Dana and Pat McAfee.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about Ari and why he's such a great partner and why he's so good to work with. He came in and he bought the UFC. They asked me to stay, and Ari is one of those guys that he lets you run your business. He lets you do what you do. And I actually met with the McMahons the last time I was in New York to really talk about. They wanted to know what it was like to be, in business with them and everything else. And obviously, I couldn't say anything but incredible positive things about it. Ari's one of those guys. You run your business, and if you need him, pick up the phone and call him, and he can make anything happen. So I think, how this is going to affect our company, it won't at all. I mean, we're going to keep doing what we do. How it affects WWE is I think that there's a lot of value that Ari can add on the business side, whether it's licensing, sponsorship, and the list goes on and on. He'll help grow those different areas of their business. And, they're valued at $9 billion. Watch and see what they are in 5 years.
It'll be a money-making machine, man.
Printing the money, and I thought it was interesting taking WWE to the next level and the dramatic rise in value in both UFC and the history speaks for itself. I mean, the purchase was laughed at when it was when the Endeavor first took over, and now it's looked at as a steal. But that's how things work. If you're a smart businessman, and I can't imagine Endeavor got to where they are based on not being smart. You have to imagine they see the length that WWE can go, and they're a monster now. Imagine what they'll be with this machine behind it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Ari is, look at his track record, man. WWE's they're going to be sitting pretty in 5 or 6 years. And this deal is going to be like, oh, you only paid $9.3 billion for it. Now you're worth 20.
Crazy.
It's going to happen.
So we also have some updates on Andrade El Idolo's contract, and he appeared at the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony over the weekend, and he had an interview with Lucha Libre Online. This was all translated, but he had said, "I'm with AEW to make it clear soon my contract will expire. I had a tear in my chest, and I got surgery in November. I was out 4 months, but soon I'll be back. I was at the Hall of Fame accompanying my wife to be next to my great friend Rey Mysterio. He's the symbol for all Latinos, Rey Mysterio." Andrade's been with the company since 2021, debuted. He hasn't wrestled since the Casino ladder match at AEW All Out last September. We know the history with Sammy Guevara in the backstage altercation. That's a drop in the bucket because everything else that went down around it, whether it be the Eddie Kingston Sammy stuff, the brawl out stuff, he was part of this larger AEW locker room chaotic time period. But Tony Khan was asked about Andrade's status with the company at Full Gear's post-event media scrum back in November. And he said many wrestlers take sabbaticals from AEW only to come back and be more involved. So that's a possibility for Andrade. Gut feeling for me, and I'll let you take it from here. I don't see Andrade staying past his contract.
No, I say let the contract run out, cut him loose. I love Andrade, but he seems hard to work with. I know nothing. Obviously, we're just fans. But just reading the tea leaves, as we say, and looking at things that have happened, and it's not even the fight. I don't give a shit that he got into a physical altercation with Sammy. It's not that. I just don't want people on my roster that go to the press and talk shit. If you're hey, I'm going to go complain to the press type of guy, get him out of there. That's my feeling on it.
So we also had the dates for the G1 Climax 33 tournament for the summer for New Japan Pro Wrestling, which they announced at Sakura's Genesis event, and it'll be held from July and August. So it's going to begin on Saturday, July 15th, and also Sunday, July 16th. And the semifinals will be held at the Sumo Hall on Saturday, August 12th, with the final set for the same building on Sunday, August 13th. Okada has won the tournament each of the last 2 years and has won the tournament of a total of 4 times. I'm excited for this. And the climax tournament with G1, I had Bryan Danielson in my fantasy booking plans. It seems like he's going to be otherwise occupied in AEW with the BCC stuff. But, man, I would love him to get away from July 15th to August 15th-ish to be involved in this, because that's dream stuff for me. And this is one of the things that was a negotiation tactic. WWE was going to allow him to do the G1. And that was something they never have done for anybody, but it was something that he looked at. And I have to imagine he's in Tony Khan's ear, like, let me get in there and have a month of wrestling and let Bryan Danielson get into the finals and have these dream matches. I think it would
be awesome. Spin it, Danielson, spin it to Tony and work with New Japan to use the G1 climax to build towards whatever big match we could have at Wembley Stadium. If you could piggyback Danielson in the G1 into shooting an angle off of that to utilize it to bring fans into Wembley Stadium, I think there's something there. You just have to create a fun situation.
So we also had the return of Matt Riddle on the WrestleMania post-Raw show. So he returned on Monday confronting The Miz. We also saw he made the save for Sammy at the end of SmackDown. As we all know, back in December, it was reported that Riddle has been suspended 60 days for violating WWE's wellness policy. He was sent to rehab, and it was reported Riddle refused to enter rehab, and then if he refused, he would be released from WWE. And he had released a quote back in December. I've been working on myself lately, and I've been saying no and setting boundaries for the first time ever, and certain people aren't happy about it, but I couldn't be healthier or happier. Thank you for all the support. Riddle was a big piece of what they were doing, and people forget, like, go back to that SmackDown match against Roman Reigns where they drew that huge rating. I was all aboard the Riddle train. Like, take the title and put it on Riddle. I was wrong there because obviously he had to deal with his own stuff, and I'm just happy to see him back. He is another personality that WWE desperately needed, and hopefully he can be set it on the right course right now.
Yeah, I'm indifferent to him. I think he's great. He has a great look. I think he's incredible in the ring. I think he's highly underrated. I mean, him and his work in the ring takes me back to like Kurt Angle, as far as he looks like a legit bell-to-bell guy. But outside of that, I don't like the guy. I mean, as a fan, I don't like him in his real life. I think he's a problem. We had a debate question months and months ago about could he be the top guy? And I just think he's got too much baggage. I think he is a PR nightmare waiting to happen. And he always has been, all the way back to his days in the UFC.
Just to play devil's advocate, but I don't want to get into a larger conversation, but you made the same case about Randy Orton too prior, and then he got his shit together. So
that's
Randy
true.
Orton was a headache for a bit, but
I would pawn off Randy Orton's problems to being an immature kid. Matt Riddle ain't a kid, man. This dude's almost 40 years old. Get your shit together. Like, Randy Orton was early 20s, being just an immature child. But yeah.
We also had the sad news about Bushwhacker Butch passing away at the age of 78, shoot named Bob Miller. And Luke Williams, his partner of 50 years, Bushwhacker Luke, announced the news on Monday, Facebook, saying he passed away last night. PW Insider reported last week that Miller had been flown to the U.S. from New Zealand and had a medical episode shortly after arriving in L.A. for WrestleMania weekend and was rushed to the hospital. He leaves behind his wife, Helen, 2 daughters and grandchildren. And, you know, this has been a conversation about, I know Seth was having, was it Seth on the Chick-fil-A show, or was it Nick from Extra Cooler was talking about maybe the Bushwhackers being a jobber tag team?
Right.
You want to add a little anecdote of saying they are a jobber tag team. He was not eulogized in the newsletter. He was just put as a short little message where Meltzer didn't see he needed to write a full eulogy. And I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. I'm just saying, as far as scope of importance in the wrestling business, I mean, you can't say like the Kiwis, Miller and Williams worked in New Zealand, Australia, and other nearby countries. And what they did as the sheep herders and all that stuff prior to their WWF run, they never won the WWF tag team titles. You know, they became a comedy team where they last until 96. I don't know. People remember fondly because of nostalgia, but I think a lot of what they did is lost because wrestling began in 1985 in a lot of our fandoms, but a lot of what they did was in the late 70s.
Yeah, I was never a Bushwhacker fan. My dad, who does not like wrestling, always thought the Bushwhackers were funny, but I was not a Bushwhacker fan. But I did grow up seeing some of the old sheep herder stuff in Jim Crockett, like old clips of that, old tapes that family members had. Sheep herders were real deal shit, man. They were mean, bloody, just brawlers. So it was so weird. It was kind of it happened all the way. Even then, Vince takes this hard edge team and just buffs out the edges and softens them up. So sheep herders, I'm all in for. Bushwhackers, no. But regardless, R.I.P. to Bushwhacker Bob or Bushwhacker Butch.
So in a shocking turn of events, Braun Breaker turned heel to end Tuesday's NXT show. And we thought Braun Breaker would be one of those guys called up on the post-WrestleMania Raw. But we got a heel turn. And at this point, are they holding off Braun Breaker because of the Rick Steiner stuff? Are they waiting for it to cool down prior to getting him back on the main roster? Or what is your take on that?
I don't think they're holding. I think WWE is proven they stick their foot in their mouth a lot on shit, and I don't think they care about Rick Steiner and his attachment to Braun Breaker. Now, if his name was Rex Steiner, they'd probably be handling it a little differently, but I think they're going to bring him into the draft. I might be wrong. I know he just, he's seemingly in a storyline. He just turned heel in NXT, but I think you bring him in on the WWE draft.
Speaking of former NXT champions, WWE former SmackDown Women's World Champion Charlotte Flair is reportedly taking time off. PW Insider reported the news on Tuesday, saying she told WWE about it this past weekend. It's unknown what the reason is or how much time she'll be off, but the break is possibly related to her desire to take part in a bodybuilding competition this summer. She's mentioned this during a lot of media appearances during WrestleMania. Her and Rhea had this epic match at WrestleMania, and she made her a surprise return back in December. So this run hasn't been that long. So she was only champion since December. She was away for a bit. Seems like she's getting the itch elsewhere, which is interesting for Flair. She doesn't seem like she has the same longevity in the business that Rick had. And, good for her chasing her passions and stuff, but it seems like she has her eyes towards other things, not just wrestling.
Yeah, I think she's winding up. Not to say she'll come back for matches and stuff, but I think she's got one foot out the door is what it feels like to me. I mean, she's no spring chicken, man. She's went at it hard for a long time. So for all the Charlotte haters and for all the Charlotte lovers, appreciate what you got. I don't think she's long for this world. I don't think in 5 years we'll be seeing Charlotte Flair wrestle.
So we also had to speak about putting their foot in their mouth. WWE also had to issue an apology for the WrestleMania video package for the Dominic Mysterio airing on Peacock during the pre-show for the first night of WrestleMania 39. It was displayed while Prison Dom talked about having served hard time. So they had stock footage of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The image at this point, and they went back post-production, replaced by the time in the video package at this point on the main card, and they replaced what it looked like. But come on, dude. Like, how could someone not, like, someone needs to be fired for this? How did you not recognize the stock footage? There's so many other things you could have used. Are we kidding me?
This is a dumbass editor who doesn't have any historical reference.
Come on.
Like,
it was an error. What are we doing? Like, come on.
Yeah, you need to
that dude
go
needs to be
over your
fired,
shit.
Or girl, whoever did this needs to be fired, because like you had one job. Get what it was said. We want some stock prison footage for Dom Mysterio. And would you go out there and grab?
And it's weird to me that there's always undertones of like, I'm not accusing WWE of anything, but it's always like,
I hear you. The Gunther stuff. Yeah.
The Gunther Stark shit with the Nazi stuff. And then Auschwitz why is there all these like Jewish Nazi stuff always popping up with this company? I'm not accusing them of any like anti-Semitic behavior or anything, but it's always like there's been a lot of Nazi, Jewish, anti-Semitism type of shit coming out of this company lately, just in And maybe it's just a coincidence, and maybe it's an oversight by a dumb editor. But I mean, I took a Holocaust studies class in high school, so I am well versed in what Auschwitz looks like. And as soon as I saw that on Mania, I was like, "Really, dude?
Like, yeah,
Really?"
exactly. It's just tone deaf, and it's like, especially there's so many other things you could have done, and at this point, it's like you got to be just a dumbass. But speaking of other things going on, we had the sale, obviously, and we're getting some of the runners up are coming to be revealed, and one of them was Liberty Media, who's the owners of F1, the Atlanta Braves, Sirius XM. They came up second apparently, and
that's crazy.
And I think one of the biggest things that everyone was citing as the difference maker was Vince McMahon. A lot of them didn't want Vince at the helm, but it's interesting enough they're spinning it that Endeavor wanted Vince, and Vince was like, "No, I don't want it anymore. I should go away." But it seems like a big calling card for WWE, and a big piece of it was Vince wanted to be the head of creative or head of the figure without walking away, because his legacy is important to him, and I don't think he wanted to go out the way he did.
Yeah, I think we all, even early on, everyone was saying like, whoever gets this deal, Vince is going to play a part in the deal.
Yeah,
as far as being a part of the company moving forward, and so I'm not shocked that that's what they went with.
So we also have WWE moving to dismiss MLW's amended antitrust lawsuit. I'll let you take the lead on here. I feel like this is just always in the news at MLW and WWE, going to war in a courtroom.
It's constant. So they dismissed the original antitrust lawsuit, and remember, MLW amended it and filed again, and now WWE is once again trying to dismiss this antitrust lawsuit. It was filed Friday. WWE once again argued that MLW has failed to allege antitrust claims of monopolization, attempted monopolization, all of that. MLW is alleging that WWE's predatory conduct prevented the company from competing or licensing programming with regards to streaming services. And this is specifically referencing MLW's deal with Reels that we talked about, the broadcast home of MLW Underground. And Reels is now a part of the Peacock streaming platform. And due to WWE's exclusive deal with Peacock, Reels is unable to stream MLW on the platform. So that's what they're alleging. The beat goes on with these two companies going to war, man.
Yeah, it seems like they're not going to give up and go away anytime soon, but WWE's trying like, all right, can you guys get away from us at this point? But MLW is holding on just like a mosquito, trying to suck as much blood before they go. But that's it for the quick hitters. We want to get to Dave's Raves and talk about his match of the week.
Dave Raves.
All right, so for Dave's Raves, last week he did not include his match of the week, but he finally released his star ratings, as I mentioned in the quick hitters. There's been a lot of controversy towards them, people putting a lot of stock into what he believes. But his match of the week was Shingo Takagi versus Aaron Hanari from a New Japan show. The controversial pick, and again, this is his style, and he explained on Twitter, if you guys look, he was answering questions about what he believes and he likes and puts into matches. And he believed this match he gave it a 5.25, which is above 5 stars. Everything else for the week, and the only other 5-star match was Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus the Usos. Everything else, Cody and Roman got 4.75. Rhea and Charlotte got 4.75. His other ratings were interesting because he did Ring of Honor, Super Card of Honor. I think Eddie and Claudio got a 4.25. So nothing really blew him away aside from the Shingo Takagi and Aaron Hanari match, which I have yet to watch. Full disclosure, I'm going to check it out because of what he said, and I put some stock into his rating scale, and they hold weight for me. But again, if you don't like Dave Meltzer and the people that argue with him on Twitter and call him names and stuff, if you don't put stock into what he says, why do you care about his star ratings?
Right. He's a historian, guys. Even if you don't agree with the specific rating, it lets you know that it's at least a match to check out and rate yourself. Like if he's rating it, then go check it out.
So he pretty much, and I pulled up the newsletter because I didn't put it in here, but he said it was a battle of exhaustion at this point. Takagi hit the pumping bomber and both went down. Takagi got to his knees and barely up at 9, while Hanari was also struggling to get up. He said easily one of the best matches of the year, 38 minutes and 15 seconds. He was very complimentary of it. And the rules of the match were interesting as well. It was you had to get a pin, a submission, and a knockout. So they went to the 25-minute mark. No falls were taken. They had all kinds of near falls. He was very complimentary about Shingo Takagi's offense and saying it is very similar to these mixed martial arts guys that going in there and you feel like it could end in any shot. And man, definitely check this match out. And especially with the convoluted stipulations for him to be as complimentary with everything that has to go on with a submission, a pinfall, and a knockout. Seems like it would be a mess, but he said it worked.
I am a fan of Meltzer's star ratings. It just gives you a skeleton, a reference, a kind of a scaffolding for good matches and bad matches. So I like looking at what Dave rates matches.
Yeah, and I think we should start and I know it's hard to really get everybody together, but we should start doing star ratings for our favorite matches and compare them, because in my mind, the Cody and Roman match was a 5-star match. The only reason he took points away was because of the finish, and that's fair because I think the finish is just as much part of the match as the match itself.
Yeah, and everybody has their own way of rating matches, so it would be interesting.
All right, let's get to the week ahead and preview what's coming on in wrestling.
The week ahead.
All right, I'm going to blast through these quick. For Dynamite on the 12th, we have Chris Jericho versus Keith Lee, Darby Allin versus Swerve Strickland. We have the International Championship on the line. Buddy Matthews taking on Orange Cassidy. We have a tag match. Jon Moxley and Claudio take on the poor tandem of Brandon Cutler and Michael Nakazawa. So going to be a bloodbath.
Smell a rout.
On Impact on the 13th, we have Tasha Steelz versus Giselle Shaw, Taylor Wilde versus Jessica, Sami Callihan, and Angels versus Joe Hendry and Dirty Dango, Kenny King versus Frank Kazarian for the main advantage of the Hardcore War. And we're going to get the final decision on whether Mickie James will wrestle at Rebellion. So then also at Impact, Rebellion will be taking place on 4/16 from Toronto, Canada. Stack card headlined by Kushida versus Steve Macklin for the vacant Impact World Championship. We have the Hardcore War, Team Bully Ray versus Team Tommy Dreamer. The Exhibition Championship match, Trey Miguel versus Mike Bailey and John Gresham, an elimination match. We get the Design versus Joe Hendry, Dirty Dango, and Santino Marella in his debut in Impact in the Ring. And we get the tag titles on the line, Bullet Club against Motor City Machine Guns in an Ultimate X match. Going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And dude, hats off to the way they've booked Steve Macklin, man. They've heated him up. I didn't think he was a main event level guy, but he's bringing the heat.
And on Raw, we don't have any matches announced. Shocker at this point because Vince is in the chair, but I'm only joking. We'll wait and see what happens on Raw. The fallout of Cody Rhodes and Brock Lesnar's feud, and probably going to be announcing that Backlash main event, Bad Bunny teaming up with Rey Mysterio against Dom and Damian Priest. That'd be my imagination taking flight here.
Yeah.
And for SmackDown from the Moda Center in Portland, Oregon, we get Shinsuke Nakamura's return, and we also get Xavier Woods versus LA Knight, which was built on that segment. SmackDown's been solid, man. I watched it this week. I thought it was very, very good. I didn't see a lot of the changes that we saw on Raw, but
yeah, they're killing it over there. I mean, it's Roman's show, but they're building the card out. I'm enjoying SmackDown.
Well, that's all we got for you guys. Chad, to lead us out. I know we got about a minute before we go, but what's going on in the tavern and going on for you?
Guys, just go to theturnbuckletavern.com. That's where you're going to find everything. Shows every week, tons of good stuff. The flagship on Thursdays, debate on Mondays. Check us out.
And that's all we got for you guys. And I appreciate you guys listening, appreciating the support. Thanks for hanging with us for WrestleMania weekend. And shout out to Bellcast for all his hard work in LA. Yeah. Doing all the good stuff for Turnbuckle Tavern. Stay with us, guys. We have a lot of good stuff coming your way.
We'll see you guys next week on Wrestling Tonight. Keep it snug and stiff, and go watch some pro wrestling.
Reach for the sky, boy.